program. Okay, so it is a translator program. Okay, or interpreter program. So we write a much simpler program in Diner, and then it will translate it, sort of write a MATLAB program for you, okay, as you will see in our application, but it sort of looks like this. Let me give you some example. So when let's say in our lecture notes we have now I organized my lecture notes a little bit, so I changed it. I find it too long, so I just cut it up into 2 files, but they are pretty much the same. Okay, so so let's say this is a Dynamic program, and that is a lot easier than if you want to write everything in MATLAB or even use other program in MATLAB. Okay, so what it does, what the program does is that it will just create MATLAB file for you, something like this, just as an example. Okay, so that you get a feel of what is going on. Okay, so this is known as a interpreter program. Okay, so you see, this is a MATLAB program. It's very complicated. Okay, very complicated program. So we need to write this. It would take us too long in order to solve a problem. Okay, so it's a very complicated MATLAB program. But what Dynamic does is that it allows us to input the model in a much simpler way, so a lot simpler, and then it will automatically translate this code into MATLAB. So sort of write the program for you. And in fact, this is what is underlying user-friendly software such as Stata or eViews. Even though when you use Stata does not show underlying program, but it is the same principle. Okay, so sort of like you write in Chinese and then the program automatically translates Chinese into some other more complicated language. Okay, so this is known as an interpreter program. Okay, so and of course we don't need to know how it is done, but just when you run the Dynamic, you will produce a whole bunch of files. Okay, a whole bunch of files because of this translation, and we don't need to care about those MATLAB files, and then we only care about the output. Okay, so here, so we will use the Gali book, right? So the Jolly Gali. So here we have the, okay, this is the examples, and then we have the notes. Okay, so we can go to the websites to download the latest version. So here, we probably won't have time to cover 3 chapters, but I hope I can cover chapter 2 and 3, okay? So chapter 2 of the book, okay, so the Gali book, it introduced familiar material, okay, because we have been using CIA model and other things. So this is the entire book is here. Okay, so the entire book is this Gali book, Monetary Policy, Inflation, and the Business Cycle. In my lecture notes, I already put the relevant chapter in the zip file. Okay, so in the zip file you will find everything is there. So the chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter, the computer programs, as well as my lecture notes. Okay. So the chapter 2, chapter 3 notes and programs, everything in the same zip file. Unzip everything, right? So you need to unzip everything, and then you get these notes, and then the programs, everything. So here we use so we go over all these concepts, okay, and also the techniques of linearization. Okay. Last time we talked about the solution of linear rational expectation model. Right? So we have the Sims method or other method that solve linear model. So basically, what this program try to do is to linearize the original Euler's equation system, so that we can make use of the linear solution method. And then last time we, in Professor Lubig's lecture notes, it sort of give you some idea about the linear solution method. Okay, so basically you need to use the program try to get rid of explosive root. Okay, so that it will generate a stable solution. Okay, so. And when we look at the example, so for example, you look at this in the output, so the program actually find out everything for you. So for example here, so the program find out all the roots, eigenvalues, and then let's say this real root 0.5, 0.9, 1.5 in infinity, right? So in this system, there are two explosive roots. Those roots or eigenvalues bigger than 1, so there are two, okay? Two explosive roots, and then you will use the method that we described last time, right? So you sort of, for the part of the system that is corresponding to the explosive root, just replace by 0, and then do all these transformations also, okay? You don't need to be very familiar with those math, but the purpose is just you get some idea about it, right? Otherwise, when you use the program, you have no idea what is going on, right? So it's good enough to know something. So you see two explosive roots, and then last time you say unique solution, okay? So the system will have a unique stable solution if the number of explosive roots is the same as the number of expectational variables, or just the same thing, the number of forecast error, right? In the Sims method, each conditional expectation will introduce one forecast error, the eta, right? So like, for example, in this model, let me show you. So let's say, for example, in this model, you have et of, so et of yt plus 1, right? So, okay, et yt plus 1, and then et pi t plus 1, so that there are, and then you check the system, there are just two of these so-called forward-looking variable or jumping variable, okay? So that for this example, okay, then you know that you need two explosive roots, okay? And then if you have exactly two, then the solution is it is the stable saddle path solution. Okay? So the system, the system will generate all this. So as you can see here, this thing is just is kind of computer method, right? in order to calculate this eigenvalue, if you use pencil and paper, it's just not possible. Even though you have this 4x4 system, but still pencil and paper is not possible. But computer is no big deal, and then you sort of find out indeed there are two explosive roots, and therefore the so-called Blanchet and Kahn-Rank condition is satisfied, and there will be a unique solution. Right? So when you use this program, you see that if this thing is not satisfied, let's say suppose this is not satisfied, then either there's no solution or there may be many solutions, infinitely many solutions. Right? So, but here 2 and 2, that's unique stable solution. Okay, so let's go back to this lecture. So here we look at this. In this chapter, the author introduced a classical model, and in fact, so far in our course, we have been talking about classical model. Okay, classical models in the sense that prices are flexible. Okay, so all the prices are flexible. Comparative equilibrium and so on. Okay, market equilibrium. Okay, so in semester 1 and semester 2, we always talk about. So in fact, we are working with classical model. So a classical model has this property. For a classical model, basically, you will have something called a classical dichotomy property. So the real sector and the nominal sector are separated. Okay, so here, take this as an example. So you suppose you have a representative household, choosing consumption, choosing work effort, and also choosing bond holding, okay, to maximize utility subject to budget constraint. And then we have seen this thing before, right? In the CIA model, we use the same setup. Okay, this is a nominal bond, and this is the price of nominal bond, right? Exactly the same setup as in the CIA. But here, there's actually no demand for money in this model because money does not enter utility, and also we don't have the CIA constraint. Okay, so here the only usage of money is just as a unit of account. Rather than counting everything in terms of apples, you define the price of apple to be $10. Okay, and then you just multiply everything by the price of apples. Or if you define the price of apple as 10 yen, then you multiply them by this price. And so all this thing is denominated in terms of the currency. So as you can see here, this price level cannot be unique because you can define one apple to be 1,000 yen or one apple to be $1 or whatever currency unit you need. So you can pretty much expect in this model the price level is nothing but a unit of account. Okay, so the price level is in fact indeterminate in this model. Okay. So here you can, so the symbol should be familiar because we have seen this kind of thing before when we work on the CIA, right? So this CT, NT, they are all so it's labor supply, right? So this is work effort and this is consumption, and then you want to multiply them, and this T of T is transfer. Because we are going to look at a comparative equilibrium, okay? So that representative agent, representative firm. So this so this transfer is in fact the profit of the firm, okay? Because in this model, later on you can see for the firm there's only one factor of production. Okay, so in this very simple model, there's no capital. So the firm try to just determine demand for labor, right? Choose NT to maximize profit, and the profit is revenue, right? So price times the output minus the labor cost, because labor is the only factor. And here you assume there's a diminishing return in the labor in these production functions, so that the total output will be distributed to labor, and also there's a residual part, the profit, okay, that will be profit in this model, okay? And this profit, you have to somehow take care of the profit in the general equilibrium, and then the natural way is that because people own the firm, right? So eventually the profit should go back to people. So this is captured by the transfer T of T. Now, if you have labor as well as capital in the model, and then if you have, let's say you have this NT1 minus alpha KT times to the power alpha, then you have constant return to scale in the two factors, then the profit must be zero for competitive equilibrium. So the labor cost plus the rental cost, okay, the rental rates times the capital must equal to the total output. In that case, then the dividend will be zero. Okay, the profit will be zero. But here you need the dividend term. Okay, you need a dividend term because you only have one factor. Okay? And you don't assume alpha to be zero. But anyway, it won't affect our equilibrium very much. Okay, so you can also, so in the both you can put all transfer into T of T, including dividend, including money and taxes, whatever you want. But just do keep in mind, even though you don't, at the minimum you need to use the term to take care of the profit of the firm in the general equilibrium, okay? And then here, you see here this expectation, right? So something must be random, otherwise you don't need this expectation. Okay, so the household maximize expected utility. Okay, so but what is random here? In fact, the randomness came from TFP, so came from the firm. Okay, so came from the firm. So in the firm problem, you have this AT here, TFP. Okay, and this TFP is assumed to be random. Okay, so that the randomness in the economy is generated by the TFP, by the total factor productivity. Okay. And we use this trick before, right? So it's a standard way to introduce randomness into the model. And last time when we talk about the CIA, we use this. Okay? Either the endowment itself is random, or if you have production, assume the TFP to be random. And here, later on, when we introduce money, we can also introduce an second source of randomness. The growth rate of money can be random, or maybe the interest rate rule may be random. Okay, so basically, you need this kind of exogenous randomness. Okay, so for example, in the TFP case, you have this epsilon t IID normal. So this is what generates this randomness. And do keep in mind when you look. When you see Euler's equation that looks like this, with a conditional expectations thing here, okay, ET of something. So this is averaging something, the randomness at t plus 1. So the randomness at t plus 1 came from these sources of exogenous random variable, like the TFP, like the policy, and so on. as we showed last time, right? So we gave you explicit formula last time in the CIA. So it's exactly the same kind of concept, okay? So here, let's say now for this kind of problem should be standard now, okay? You can use dynamic programming, okay? So in the appendix, we can use dynamic programming. So here, just use the same trick as we did before. You can, so you want to maximize this subject to this constraint. So you assume this budget constraint to be binding, okay, to be equal, and then you can solve out everything in solve out CT and then substitute CT into here. And here, notice that we have, because the computer program that we're going to use is very strict on the timing of the variable, so that we need to adopt the end of period timing convention. Okay, so the BT minus 1 is the amount of nominal bond at the end of T minus 1. So that at the beginning of time T, you have this thing predetermined. Okay, so this BT minus 1 is a state variable. Okay, so you know that. Okay, and then BT, right? So BT is something that you choose at time T. Okay, you choose BT at time T. You choose BT minus 1 at time T minus 1. So that's so this BT is what you choose at time T, and then by time T plus 1, it is known. Okay. So so for dynamic programming formulation, so you can look at the appendix. So here, just kind of a matter of notation. Oops, where is it? It disappeared. Oh, okay, it's here. Okay, so I changed it a little bit. So basically, I think this notation is BT, right? So in the old version, I changed to the beginner period, but here I want to use the same notation. In fact, this is meant to be BT minus 1, BT and so on. So S is the same. So this is the state variable. Okay, so at the beginning of time T, this is what is given. Okay, so this BT minus 1 is what is given, and then at the beginning of time T, the randomness realized. So the TFP randomness realized. So you know the value of the TFP. Okay, and then in the budget constraint, you want to use the budget constraint to substitute out in CT. So you choose BT and NT. Okay, so at time T you choose BT and NT. So the Bellman equation should look like that, and then you go through the usual mechanics, and then you should be able to get something that we also derived before. So in CIA model, we have the same thing, and here I used a pattern notation. Pi t means to be pt over pt minus 1, so that pi t plus 1 is random. Okay, if you use ready-write notation, you can be confused if you are not careful enough. So here, because we use the end of period, so we are consistent about this notation. Okay, use the end of period time convention, so that whenever you see a t plus 1 variable, it will be random as of time t. Therefore, so this thing is random, this thing is random, and then the randomness came from the AT plus 1. So this ET is meant to be averaging over those possible values of AT plus 1. So we have these things, we have the same equation we derived this before in the CIA handout. Okay, so this is known as the consumption Euler's equation. And then you can also write this is the price of a nominal bond, and then this will be the same as 1 over nominal interest rate. Okay, so this equation can be written in terms of the nominal interest rate. And then this one is just the marginal rate of substitution between leisure and consumption has to be equal to the real wage. So these first order conditions. Okay, so in the text, there's another way, not as rigorous as the dynamic programming, called the Lagrangian method, but might be, if you want, you can use this method. Okay, so this thing is just pretending you are working with a finite horizon problem. Just write it up like that. But then whenever you see a t+1 change to et, now it's very hard to justify rigorously why you end up like this, because here you take E0 and here you suddenly you change to et. So that's why this is not a rigorous method. Okay? But dynamic programming is rigorous method that prove precisely that has to be like that. Okay? So just treat this thing as a shortcut. But anyway, if you treat this thing as a shortcut, you can get the same Euler's equation. Okay. So here, now to show you, if we are going for numerical solution, obviously we need to have a specific expression for this marginal utility. Okay, so du, dc, and so on. So this explicit functional form. So the book used this functional form. Okay, so this utility function is like that. Okay, so so this functional form is convenient because it will give you nice formula. Okay, so here in this chapter, you can see that by adopting this convenient functional form and also doing log linearization, you can get closed form solution. Okay, so get closed form solution of the equilibrium. Okay, so that by looking at those closed form solutions, you will understand the properties of the model better. Okay, otherwise, if you don't have closed form solution, it's hard to understand. Okay, so otherwise, if you just look at this, there's very little you can get from it. Okay, so basically, this in the Gali book, the author tried to use log linearization to get log linear solution of the model. And then by looking at the log linear solution, it tells you quite a lot about the properties of the model so that you will understand a lot better. Okay, so the computer can actually do much better than that. It will automatically do the log linearization for you, and it can also do a second order approximation. Okay, but the problem, as usual, is that numerical solution is you don't understand what is going on. Okay, so that's why the book spent a lot of space try to use pencil and paper method to work out the solution. The purpose is to get you understand. Okay, basically get you understand. It's not for computation or simulation purpose. Okay, so you have to understand why there's so much pencil and paper work here. Okay, so here, if you use this, now this utility function is kind of nice because they are in economics behind this parameter. Okay, so there's a meaning for these parameters, sigma parameter and the phi parameter. In fact, they measure to what extent the consumer is willing to substitute intertemporally. Okay, so 1 over sigma is in fact the elasticity of intertemporal substitution, the extent to which people are willing to substitute current consumption and future consumption. Okay, so the bigger the sigma, then the more willing is the consumer to substitute. Now, if you are more willing to substitute, then it means that your consumption profile will not be that smooth, right? Because you can tolerate, you have a very low consumption today, and tomorrow you have very high consumption tomorrow. You are willing to do that, okay? On the other hand, if people are not willing, let's say if the sigma is very small, okay, then it means that people are not willing to get a fluctuate consumption profile, right? Because they will feel very, very bad if the time path of the consumption is fluctuating a lot, right? So they would rather a extremely smooth consumption path, right? So it captures people's taste, right? So in the real world, some people are willing to tolerate a fluctuating consumption path, some people are not, right? Okay, so this parameter has an economic meaning, and similarly, this phi captures the elasticity of labor supply with respect to wage, right? So some people will work very hard as long as there's a little bit increase in the real wage, but some people are not, right? So it depends on people. So all these things capture people's taste, right? The taste towards substitution between current consumption and future consumption, and also the taste between substitution between consumption and leisure, right? So all these are behavioral parameter. Okay. So this utility function, because this is a very convenient way to capture this substitution behavior. So this is a very popular one in the literature, right? Okay. So with a nice interpretation of the parameter. Okay, and it also gives very nice formula. Okay, so once you use this utility function, you can get very nice formula like that. Okay, so so this marginal rate of substitution. Okay, the marginal rate of substitution between consumption and leisure will sort of looks like that, and then it's equal to the real wage. Okay, so this is the first order condition from the consumer problem. Right? So, and also the this equation. Okay, so with nice formula. Okay, so the consumer problem is done, and then the firm's problem, right? So here, firm's problem, try to maximize profit, and then the output also depends on labor, and this is very easy to solve, and we know that the solution must be the firm would like to hire labor until the marginal product of labor is equal to the real wage, right? So these are well-known conditions, okay? Profit maximization condition in perfect competition, right? So here, take prices as given, consumer take prices as given, firms take wages as given, and also the output price is given, okay? And this is a well-known condition for the firm, right? So the profit maximization condition for the firm. And then here, because we use this Kaplan-Class production function, so it's convenient. So that's so this is the marginal product of labor, and because the production function is Kaplan-Class, so that you can always write down the marginal product of labor as this form. as a nice formula. Okay, 1 minus alpha y over n. If you have capital K to the power alpha, marginal product of capital would be alpha times y over k. Okay. So nice formula. And all these things came from nice functional formulas, Kaplan-Meier function. Okay. And then you have so you solve the consumer problem, the firm problem, you bring them together. And here's the comparative equilibrium. And by the way, I didn't write down here, but in fact, as we mentioned in the CIA handout, at equilibrium, there's no trade. Okay, actually, there's no trade in bonds. Okay, because this homogeneous agent. Okay, you have numerous identical agents. Okay, so nobody actually want to borrow. Okay, so this is purely, as we mentioned in the CIA handout, this is purely for the sake of pricing the nominal bond. Okay, so this is a standard trick in asset pricing theory. This is called the Lucas tree model. Okay, so you have a numerously many homogeneous agent. Okay, so you know that because everybody's are identical, therefore there must be no trade. In the sense that if everybody wants to borrow and nobody wants to lend, that cannot be trade, right? Okay. See, the only possibility might be somebody want to borrow, somebody want to lend. Okay. But here, because of the homogeneous agent model, everybody want to borrow or everybody want to lend. Therefore, there's no saving. Okay. There's no saving. So therefore, at equilibrium, BT must be 0 for all t. Okay, and this is a very simple trick, and yet Lucas finds that even though under this kind of very simple situation, the asset price is determined. Okay, so this is known as the Lucas tree model. So asset price means the bond price, right? Okay, the bond price is actually determined by the Euler equation. You see here, this is the bond price. Okay, so the equilibrium bond price must follow this formula. This is the asset pricing formula. Okay, Lucas tree asset pricing formula. Even though there's no trade in the asset market. So here, in the comparative equilibrium, you have to keep in mind that BT are all 0. Okay, so there must be no trade in the asset market, but the price is determined nevertheless. Okay, so so we have the first two equations came from the household problem, the consumer problem, and then the next two came from the firm's problem. Okay, so let's, for the sake of it's a good idea to have certain label to the equation, right? So that you get a good idea about it. Now, from the consumer problem, the consumer make optimal choice about their labor supply, okay, and also their optimal choice about their consumption demand, right, or their goods demand. So these are demand. So you can kind of understand this. These two equations should determine the labor supply and goods demand from the consumers. Right? So that's why we label this thing as labor supply schedule, and then this we'll call it consumption orders equation. Okay. And then the firm problem, the the other side, okay, the other side of the same coin, right? So the counterpart of the consumer. So the firm will determine labor demand and the goods supply, right? Okay, so we label them like that, okay? If you want to, you can put, maybe you can put, let's say this end supply, this one should be end demand, right? And then this should be goods demand, and then this should be goods supply, but we don't try to do that, okay? But demand and supply, basically. Right? And then goods market clearing, right? Demand for goods equal to supply of goods, okay? So this is what it means. And then we omit, if you have a separate symbol, for example, if you label this thing to be ND, you label this to be NS, then you need to add the labor market clearing condition, right? ND equals to NS, right? So here we use the same symbol. So we have already imposed the labor market clearing. Okay? And we have this system, and then if you count the number of variables, and you find that we have too many variables. Okay, so basically you cannot determine RT, the nominal interest rate. So here, so basically this is a kind of an incomplete model. Okay, so if you look at this model, because you only allow price to be just determined somehow. Okay, so this is just a unit of account. Okay, so you don't have so presumably there's something called money, but where is this money coming from? So the reason why you don't have this system so far can only determine 5 variables. Okay, so the consumption, the labor, the output, and then here the real wage, rather than the nominal wage and the price level separately. But you can only determine the ratio, the real wage. Similarly, you can only determine the real interest rate, which is defined to be the nominal rate divided by inflation rate. Okay, so and the reason why you don't have enough equation, so you can count here, you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, and then this one determine this A, right, all by itself. Okay, so basically you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you can determine these 5 variables. And the reason why, and it's pretty obvious why you cannot determine this P or this pi or R separately, is because you don't have enough equations. You don't have enough equations. And those missing equations are those money demand, money supply kind of things. Okay. Otherwise, because here you say you have something called money, but in the model, you didn't model the money. So that's why this is an incomplete model. Okay. So here, so basically this model so far, then it means that you actually don't need money here, right? So even though you put everything into real terms, and then you just determine these 5 variables. Okay, so the consumption and so on. Okay, so you need some extra equation in order to determine the nominal variables. So then you need to either introduce money formally into the model. Okay, so that there will be a demand for money, and then you postulate there's a supply of money that said central bank determine the supply of money, okay? And these are the extra equations that will allow you to determine the nominal variable. So here, the classical model, you actually don't need money, and then you get all the real variables determined, and then here you can you can get a better understanding of the properties of the model if you have closed form solution. Okay.